I actually wrote a blog post you can find, which said that like crypto adoption is going to be solved through a file management app. But it's amazing. If you look in existing application stores, they have hundreds of millions of users, these file management apps. We were a pioneer in the DePIN space. We were building and deploying before DePIN was a term. And we're built on the Ethereum network because things like IOTEX and Peak didn't exist at the time of when we were building. But we're now what's called a DePIN aggregator. And this means you can use our hardware to provide infrastructure to other blockchains and other types of Web3 projects and applications. And by doing that, you can earn that project's token as well as our token. So now we have the FX Blocks Lite, and we have another version. So one has, I think, 8 gigabytes of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage. Then we have another option which is sold out at the moment, but we'll bring some more into production. That's 32 gigabytes of RAM and 2 terabytes of storage. And we have had in the past an ETH staking version where we partnered with Rocket Pool, and you could use it more as an ETH miner or staking device. But at the moment, we're really focusing on deploying FX Blocks Lite. And it is modular and composable. So although it comes with 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes internally, you can add in any additional storage you want, either internally to the device, or you can just daisy chain it in through USB-C. If someone uses our Rails, our protocols, and builds a decentralized application on top of the protocols we've developed, nearly 40% of our token, so if you've got 1 token, 40% of that goes to all the open source developers and downward dependencies that contributed to the development of that application. I will say, however, we've also been experimenting with Starlink. So if you can connect one of your FX blocks to Starlink, you can then propagate that internet, like local area network internet, throughout a pool of boxes. So that could be a really interesting use case. If there wasn't access to rural broadband somewhere, or we look at remote and indigenous communities could potentially benefit from spinning up one of these local pools.
You've just heard from Dr. Kate Withers, founder at Functionland. Kate and her team have taken on the world of software, hardware, and blockchain engineering concurrently, all in a bid to reshape how we as individuals store and retrieve data online. Move over Google Drive, Dropbox, AWS, and iCloud. Say hello to an all-new world of data privacy away from massive corporations. But it's not just data. Their foray into open source hardware opens up so many possibilities, the only limits are your imagination. The community has already spun up Minecraft servers, local LLMs, and media servers, with more innovations coming out every week. Before I get into this edition of Is This the New Internet, I'd like to thank all the mentors of my previous episode, with perks Chinmay Patel. Your names are all on the screen. Thanks an absolute ton. Your support means everything. Oh yes, these episodes will also be on YouTube from now on. For those of you who are new here, each and every episode of this podcast can be minted on Pods Media. The link is in the description. If you'd like to be a part of the Mint gang and see your name on the list in the future, mint away. And for the collectors who've minted 3 or more episodes, I'd like to give you a special mention. For those without ENS names, I'll just read out the last 4 digits of your wallet address. Here we go. Sorry in advance for the gory mess I will make mispronouncing your names. AICSB, Rudra, Crypto Badal, Wick3, Web3 Ninjas, Pedro Villela, A Toma Tomo, Based Students, 0x Alden, Wiscott, Unicorn Rainbow Links, Frenchie, 14A8, 0x Jensen, 68F6, CAB4, CBA1, 0x Lucas, Cryptech, 0x Gia Pedros. And finally, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to be notified of every episode. I've also got a newsletter that includes each episode, the companion blog, and a lowdown of events and media that made an impression on me. It goes out every other week. You can sign up at my website, marvynpaul.com. So let's get into the latest episode of Is This the New Internet with Dr. Kate Withers of Functionland. So with Dr. Kate Withers, welcome to Is This the New Internet?
Thank you, Marv. Thank you for having me.
Could you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, please? How did you get into crypto? When did Toronto become home? And when did you feel that you wanted to build something over here within the crypto space?
All right, sure. So I am originally from South Africa, but have lived here and gone to high school and university here in Canada. So a while ago, I used to work for an institution called the Ontario Centres of Excellence. And this is where we helped startups and small and medium-sized enterprises adopt technology or innovate. And so I was involved in a few blockchain projects, more around transparency and supply chain and things like that. But I remember encountering something called a Jax wallet. So I was so excited and intrigued by that. So I got a Jax wallet and I was able to teach myself how to buy some Ripple and Stellar lumens at the time. So I'd really thought, I tried to look into a bunch of the coins and I thought those seemed to have the most utility perhaps in the long run, looking at how they would replace Swift codes and parts of banking and things like that. And I think Ripple at the time, it still seems to have some kind of Toronto presence. So those ones were maybe the first ones I bought, but I don't think I even have access to that wallet anymore, unfortunately. But really wanted to learn about blockchain, and I'm always looking at the cutting edge and what's the latest in technology or innovation. And so blockchain really spoke to me. So I was originally approached by now a very good friend, Kayvon, to work on an artificial intelligence project back in around 2016. And this was to look at natural language processing and some of the things that we're seeing today in terms of LLMs or personal agents. But back in 2016, it was called Assistor.ai. And then around 2021, we re-examined what we were trying to do, which was always to look at first principles and look at monetizing open source developers. So this was something that open source was our key tenet to always focus on. And we saw this opportunity to look at Web3 and the incorporation of hardware and blockchain protocols as a means of monetizing open source developers. So in order to do that, we needed to look at both hardware, blockchain protocols, and software protocols. So around 2021, we formed the company Functionland, and then we joined forces with our other co-founder, Ehsan. And now we've added on team members or founded others since then. So that's kind of where Functionland started and our interest in blockchain.
Nice. So you touched on artificial intelligence in like 2016. That's like a while back. What did the industry look like then?
Well, we've got some scholars here in Toronto that are researchers of AI, and so it's sort of emerging from some of these past AI winters, let's say. And what we were really interested in is that the smartphone could now allow you to do lots of sort of processing of artificial intelligence on the edge or on a device. So we had wanted to look at sort of contextual agents or maybe something that could even help in the workforce. But this idea of processing things on the edge was becoming much more technologically feasible. And so that was what piqued our interest.
Okay, nice. And were any of those things that you worked on now present in other large language models that we see today? Or did the industry take a different path towards achieving this?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I think I wasn't quite aware of where it was going per se. I was just very excited to be working with NLPs. And Kayvon, though, is very much a futurist. So he is one of the people that really leads the vision for our company. And he could see, I think, much more so than others, this idea of local agents or agents working and acting on our behalf. And he was very much a fan of this idea of this contextual piece. So agents not just working in the dark or working from prompts or rule-based things, agents that had some kind of background knowledge that they were working from.
That's fantastic. That's really cool because this is kind of where we want AI agents to go right now. So it's fascinating that this was in the conversation so many years ago.
Yes. And so it's kind of interesting. We'll get into it a bit more, but with FX blocks now, we've been able to deploy a local version of DeepSeek. And so now we're basically running an entire LLM inference mechanism on our FX blocks. And so to me, that really speaks to our AI sister roots from back in the day.
Cool. Very cool, very cool. So could you tell me a little bit about your background as a builder in crypto, as a business leader in crypto? You told us that you first bought into it as an asset that you would like to invest in, but how was your journey from trader and investor to business leader?
All right. So my educational background is actually in agriculture. So agronomy, growing crops like corn and wheat, like really large broadacre crops. So for my master's, I started to realize that we were creating a lot of data and analyzing a lot of statistics, and we're using, computers in the lab or our laptops. But there was this need to pool the data somewhere and have access to it. So later on, if another researcher wanted it, they didn't have to reinvent the wheel, or they could grab that data. And sometimes the data was just stored on a graduate student's computer or professor's computer or filing cabinet, and then it just became obsolete. It wasn't retrievable. So I've always had this idea of the need for big data and mechanisms and data preservation, I suppose, in terms of research. When I left academia and joined the Ontario Centres of Excellence, which is now the Ontario Centres of Innovation, there I helped put together projects between academia, companies, and startups, and had to work on what they call the advanced technology platforms, so 5G and cloud computing. So those were the two where I had to go meet with companies, meet with professors, figure out the needs of the company or the research interests of the professors, and then put together projects. So I've always had to understand where companies or projects were from a technical perspective. So what they needed to do to technically integrate to advance, especially with product development or commercialization especially. So, the things that worked really well in the lab and that were well understood, but to get them to commercialization is one of my passions. And so that's really helped me in my role in Functionland because we've had to commercialize hardware, commercialize our software protocols. And then as a partnerships lead, I'm talking to L1s, L2s, decentralized applications, data oracles, RPCs to see, do they need Functionland? Do we need them? And sometimes it's not good to engage with a company whose time you're just going to waste essentially because there's no need for that integration, right? You're not compatible. There's no upside for either company. So I've become really good at seeing exactly where the piece of technology is and then what it needs to advance, and then who I need to have conversations with to make that happen.
So could you give us the 101 of Functionland? So we can start for the non-technical folks, and then we can probably get into the technical details a little bit later.
All right. Well, Functionland is, like most projects, constantly evolving, but we always have these strong roots from which we come from. So Functionland originally was this idea to help people store their own files and photos. So when we were looking to launch Functionland and start our company, Google was threatening to announce that they were going to start charging people to store their files and photos. And they had always promised consumers the ability to store things forever for free. And then all of a sudden they said, we're going to start introducing this tiered pricing model. So that's exactly when we launched our first sort of GitHub repositories, and we wrote a big article in these like developer-facing media sources to say, hey, we're here and we're going to fight this idea that consumers are going to be boiling frogs when it comes to cloud-based like applications, right? So we said, let's build a hardware device that acts as your personal server that sits on your desk, and you can save all your own files and photos to this device and be able to do that for free and be able to retrieve your files and photos and own them yourself. So for instance, some of us have Dropbox subscriptions, and maybe you stop paying those, and luckily I think Dropbox is hanging on to things for people for at least for now. But if you stop paying and you lose access to your Google Photos or your Dropbox files, they could be gone forever. And then also, like I said, you're this boiling frog in that they could keep raising the prices or making the amount of storage you're given access to smaller and starting to squeeze you from a subscriptions point of view. So that's what Functionland started out as. And then with this hardware device, if you provide 1 terabyte's worth of storage to the network, and it's not strictly storage, the storage and compute aspects as well, then you can reciprocally get 1 terabyte of storage back from the network. So in that way, you're able to store your files and photos for free. And then you're earning for providing that storage to the network that either consumers are going to, come and use that, or as things are progressing, businesses or blockchains themselves will need access to the storage, and you will be rewarded for provisioning of that storage.
So it's going to be a collection of individuals, businesses, organizations, all with their own boxes and all contributing to the network? Or are you going to go to the data center route at some point as well to really scale up this sort of functionality?
So that's a great question. So first and foremost, it's B2C. We want everybody who are consumers to purchase a device, and we're going to get into this a bit later, but you can use existing hardware to run our protocols. But the idea is to get lots of these nodes that are owned and operated by people up and running across the globe. And then by combining all those compute and storage resources, it creates this sort of surplus of data storage that other enterprises can then start to use as their back end. And if they've got a very sort of cheap and robust back end, they don't need to transfer those costs onto their consumers of their decentralized applications. And this is also probably the case with AI and LLMs, if you're able to use our hardware, or perhaps some other companies like Render or something like that, their storage GPUs, you can create products for people at lower price points. So, back to your question of what Functionland is, it has evolved since then. So we were a pioneer in the DePIN space. We were building and deploying before DePIN was a term. And we're built on the Ethereum network because things like IOTEX and Peak didn't exist at the time of when we were building. We've now since started to do partnerships with both of those, Peak and IOTEX. But we're now what's called a DePIN aggregator. So we're one of the original DePIN aggregators. And this means you can use our hardware to provide infrastructure to other blockchains and other types of Web3 projects and applications. And by doing that, you can earn that project's token as well as our token. So one of the examples of this is our partnership with the Streamer Network. So they're very focused on like low latency streaming and media. And now already you can go onto your FX Blocks application on your phone, spin up a streamer node, and then you start earning data tokens as well as our FULA token.
Okay, so it seems that there's a lot of stuff where if you're technically, like if you have any technical competence, you can really play around with this box to really adapt it to your needs. So for someone who isn't that technical, how much of a plug and play set of options do we have with this sort of functionality?
Yeah, so we've always wanted to be plug and play. We really wanted to make this as easy as possible for anyone to get up and running, regardless of their technical background or where they are in that learning curve. We have had some, pushback, and rightfully so, from our community saying it's not as plug and play as you have said, because there have been some sort of onboarding issues, but our community, both technical and our other community members, have been working all together to make that onboarding process much more streamlined. So you can imagine we've sent out this piece of hardware, and then we now need to do these over-the-air updates. So in some cases, we needed our early users to reflash their hardware. That's ended up being a little more technical than we would have liked. But now we talk about the DePIN aggregator capabilities. You don't need to be technical for that. There's literally a plugin. So we've abstracted away all of those technical pieces, and you're now using your, what we call the FX Blocks DApp, so your FX Blocks Decentralized app on your phone, and saying, hey, I want to run a streamer network node, and it's quite straightforward to do it. You maybe need to be a little bit technical, but as I said, we're making it much more easier for anyone to do. And we now also have like a GUI or some sort of user interface to run a DeepSeek agent locally using FX Blocks without too much technical know-how. So as we go, we'll become more and more plug and play. But the idea is it's not for technical-minded folks only.
Great, that's a relief because, I love tech, but, the moment I need to start going into the command line interface, it's like, I need to take a step back. So this is music to my ears. You mentioned the open source world, and you mentioned how you wanted to make stuff for the open source world. So how has that informed this part of your journey, and how do you plan to keep integrating this with the open source world in the future?
Right. Okay. So first and foremost, all our code is open source. You can find it on GitHub. You can fork it. You can add comments, raise issues, build upon it. So it's open source 100%. Our hardware is also open source. So if you wanted to take our designs and your Dell technologies or Seagate or something like that, and you wanted to start building our hardware, you can absolutely do that. And we see ourselves coming out of the hardware world eventually and being much more software and blockchain focused, and having big tech on the hardware side at least, or indie developers or people who play around with hardware can take our designs and whip up something of their own. So open source through and through. The other aspect is that when someone earns our token, they can use that token to buy or interact with decentralized applications. If someone uses our rails, our protocols, and builds a decentralized application on top of the protocols we've developed, then people who've earned FULA tokens can use these FULA tokens, like I said, to buy those dApps or interact with them. And nearly 40% of our token, so if you've got one token, 40% of that goes to all the open source developers and downward dependencies that contributed to the development of that application. So they will be compensated in proportion to what value they've brought to that application. So if you're contributed to Rust or Go or something like that, and that's been a part of the application, then those contributors will be rewarded. Not only do we use open source and advocate open source, we're actually finding one of the first mechanisms in the world that's not just like philanthropy based to pay these open source developers.
That's great. So Toronto based, open source, and for the greater good. Like, you guys are a 3 for 3 for what my podcast is all about.
Oh, nice. Okay. I mean, I should add, I'm not an expert on Linux, but we're very much fans of Linux. If you have Linux-based hardware, you can very much set up our protocols upon that. And we've really learned from Linux and like Mozilla and things like that as some trailblazers in the open source space.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So decentralized storage is a huge problem, right? It's a big demand. It is a complicated thing to get right. It's been around for a while. Like, a few other companies have tried. Like, we've heard of IPFS a lot. We've heard of Arweave. My podcast is an on-chain podcast. Arweave is part of the back end of it going on-chain. So what sets Functionland apart from all these? And what did you see about what they were doing that you felt that you could probably improve on?
Yeah, no, definitely. There's some players in the data storage or the decentralized data storage space. Protocol Labs and Filecoin is obviously one of the biggest ones. So we were actually the winners of a Filecoin or 1 to 2 Filecoin hackathons a long time ago. And we've gone through 2 Filecoin-based accelerators. So through Outlive Ventures Filecoin Basecamp and then through Techstars Seattle Filecoin-based accelerator as well. We are backed by and have been invested in by Protocol Labs and or Filecoin in some sort of capacity. And you mentioned IPFS. So IPFS is a technology that came out of Protocol Labs, and our technology is built on top of IPFS. So when it comes to data storage technology, we are sort of IPFS based and focused. And this means that, your files are safe forever and can use all the other great attributes of IPFS. When it comes to the other storage providers, some are maybe strictly more file-based, and then data gets a bit more complicated than just files when it comes to storage. And I guess when we're looking at our competitors, I always say that some of our competitors can end up being strategic partners. You never know. But when we were looking at sort of the competitive landscape, I like to do sort of charts and compare the features and benefits, or I look at creating like a quadrant graph. And then what are those axes that separate us from our competitors, right? So there was this idea of like forever storage. So is like Lighthouse. So Nandit Mira is one of the founders of Lighthouse. And we used to talk to him quite a bit back in the day. So they are very much proponents of forever storage that's really safe. And also Filecoin, for instance, likes this idea of storing humanity's sensitive data, is information about genocides that we should make sure that humanity can always access and that's not going to be censored or, wiped from history. So there's that sort of, not niche, but that's what some storage companies are really focused on. And when it comes to Storj, Arweave, these other competitors that we have, we really wanted to take a mobile-first approach. So we built the first ever mobile native decentralized application and really wanted to make sure that people could store and retrieve their files and photos with their smartphone. So with that comes this idea of retrievability. So we've always built with retrievability in mind first, not how do we store it and then worry about retrievability later, which has been the path for some companies. And then the idea of latency. So we've always said, can we be faster than the cloud? The cloud is going to be our base and we have to be able to beat it. So we differ from those companies in that we're mobile native first and we're focused on latency and retrievability. And then I guess price, you don't always want to differentiate on price. It could just be a race to the bottom. But with this idea of being able to reciprocally provide and access storage, obviously can bring the price down quite considerably as well.
Great. So there are probably competing offerings, right? Competing priorities, not offerings, like low cost, privacy, and ease of use. So how are y'all specifically addressing these competing priorities?
Yes, I think so with privacy, that's very, very important to us. And people do prioritize privacy, especially when it comes to storing personal files and photos. But it's not always something you can sell things based upon. Like, people talk about privacy a lot, but then they'll often opt for convenience sometimes. So we really want to be able to, privacy is not a negotiable. So our files are encrypted and we make use of a lot of Ethereum's tooling to make sure that things are encrypted while they're being stored, while they're being transferred. Privacy is first and foremost, but then that accessibility and retrievability is one of our major focuses as well. So they are competing. Sometimes it's you have to pick one over the other, or they can affect each other, but we've been able to really sort of hone in on all of those at once, I'd say.
This idea of permanence is a very tricky one because what does it mean to store something online permanently? Could you walk us through, like for a layman, when we store stuff on the cloud, what happens? And how does one compare that to what happens if we store it on the decentralized web through Functionland?
Yes, I think for this question, I'd maybe put it to one of my other co-founders who have thought about this through and through. I can say that because we base our storage on IPFS, that idea of permanency comes from that technology to a large extent. We also, through our peer-to-peer network, will take your files and photos and then store them redundantly up to 5 times across the network. So if one of your nodes goes down, you're always able to, it'll actually spin up an additional copy to make sure that that redundancy factor is always there. So we use IPFS to make sure it's like there forever. And IPFS is based on a content addressing. So rather than pointing to a file and saying this is where that file is, where it's located, it's actually based on the content addressing, the content itself. So it's easy to, not easy, but one is able to pull on it essentially forever. Yeah, and I think when you're not focused on storing things in a centralized text data centers, if they go bankrupt or if a data center itself geographically is disrupted or taken out, there's less risk if it's stored in in a network that has thousands of nodes all over the world.
Okay, great. So I think that's a great segue to talk about the specific nodes that you are creating with Functionland. So the FX blocks, they look beautiful.
Thank you.
With complete credit to you and the team for making something that looks so good. If it's going to be on someone's desk, it better look good, especially with how design has gone really far forward since the pandemic, right? Since the home office is this all-important space for you. You need it to look good. You need to feel comfortable. So can you tell me about that? How did you come up with that design? Where does, the functionality shift into you doing some creative expression with how it looks? So did you think about that balance? And who is it for? Tell me your top 5 types of profiles that you think of people that would be most interested in a box like this.
All right. So originally we had an FX blocks design that had multiple towers. I believe it was 9 towers. And then it had a hub. So you could plug and play and take out a tower and replace it. You could have 1 tower or 9 towers. We still have those further down our pipeline, I'd say, or further down our roadmap. But we were able to actually put so much utility and so much versatility into 1 tower, which we'll talk about, that it actually offset the need for the multiple FX blocks, 9 tower unit. So we do sometimes have some strife with our community because they really had wanted that original design, and it's not here yet per se, but none of the utility or usage has been compromised whatsoever. You can do everything with the FX blocks Lite and the versions that we have today available, which I'll talk about in a second. In terms of the design, so I think Kayvon, of course, is one of the major original designers. So he's our hardware specialist and, the visionary. And he came up with an original design and the lighting of it. And it was beautiful, but it was very angular and steel and industrial looking. And I thought it was really beautiful at the time, but compared to what we have now, it was probably not so much. So luckily, we were introduced through Outlier Ventures, actually, to one of the world's most renowned industrial designers called Yves Bahar. So he has a beautiful industrial design focused company that took in our designs, and he worked on that and came up with what we now have, which is more of that rounded look and gives you that feeling of unboxing an Apple product. I'm going to compare it to anything. So now we have the FX Blocks Lite, and we have another version. So one has, I think, 8 gigabytes of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage. Then we have another option, which is sold out at the moment, but we'll bring some more into production. That's 32 gigabytes of RAM and 2 terabytes of storage. And we have had in the past an ETH staking version where we partnered with Rocket Pool, and you could use it more as an ETH miner or staking device. But at the moment, we're really focusing on deploying FX Blocks Lites. And it is modular and composable. So although it comes with 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes internally, you can add in any additional storage you want, either internally to the device, or you can just It's like daisy chain it in through USB-C. So I've actually had mine providing up to 3 terabytes of storage in the past, but right now I just have it back at 1 terabyte.
Okay, so I'm thinking of maybe getting a network attached storage system of some kind at home. Would an FX blocks be that network assisted storage, or would I need to use it in conjunction with, let's say, a Synology NAS or something?
Yes. Yeah. So, we are definitely inspired by network attached storage. I mean, that is what we actually are considered blockchain attached storage. So some very, very smart person in marketing helped us come up with that. And it's exactly true. So you could get a QNAP or a Synology or some sort of network attached storage device, but you're quite limited in the utility of it. I think QNAP's coming really quite far in terms of its utility. It has a QNAP cloud now, so you can perhaps access and interact with your files and photos when you're away from home or away from that network. But we wanted to be able to be, on a beach somewhere with maybe limited internet access far, far away from the world and be able to open up your phone and show someone a photo of your family, right? And so we offer much more utility than a network attached storage device per se.
So could you tell me some interesting use cases for the FX blocks that you've seen the community come up with? So what is the potential of, if a creative person has this on their desk, what sort of things can they get up to?
Yeah, no. So the idea is we want people to build all sorts of decentralized applications. We see it being a whole ecosystem of applications. So our team built FX Photos, which is an open source Google Photos decentralized application. And we're working on FX Files. So FX Files is actually a file manager. And they seem very boring. I actually wrote a blog post you can find, which said that crypto adoption is going to be solved through a file management app. But it's amazing. If you look in existing application stores, they have hundreds of millions of users, these file management apps. And we're actually working on an integration with one of these companies. So we wanted to build sort of these flagship decentralized applications and then say, hey, community, you're able to now build your own applications. Be creative. Use our SDKs or whatever we have built for developers. So I told you, so recently our co-founder Ehsan built a GUI for running DeepSeek locally on an FX block. So that's the most recent and potentially creative use of the FX blocks. But one of our community members actually built a Minecraft server, shortly after having it delivered to his house, Marco. And this just blew me away because I knew we had a GPU inside the FX blocks that was so very commonly used by mobile phones and mobile gaming folks, but I couldn't believe that he'd built a Minecraft server. And I was really excited about that. And I hope there's other use cases like that emerge.
Yeah, I see. What you said about, boring use cases driving crypto forward. I think that's so true. We need the hype to get people to care about this. But at the end of the day, the cold hard work that goes on behind the scenes just to get this infrastructure up and running. We are effectively just rebuilding a parallel world decentralized. And storage is going to take such a huge part of that. Have you guys thought of a number of how many FX blocks do you think you need around the world to achieve this decentralized storage vision that you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. The vision is for everyone to have one on their desk. So that puts us, a virgin of 7 billion or so. No, not quite. The more nodes that are out there, the better in terms of the total amount of storage that those nodes provide. But more importantly, it's the distribution of the nodes. To me, that's more important. So the number is important, but then the distribution is also very important. So we want, at the moment, if you fire up an FX blocks and get it set up with a network, you have to choose a pool. So either you can create your own pool of FX blocks if you had some kind of use where you wanted to have 5 or 6 or multiple FX blocks working together, or you had a really low latency need, and so you wanted to have to in really close proximity to a pool of FX blocks. So at the moment we have about, I believe it's 3 based on where you are in the world. So if you have an FX blocks in Denmark, then you're going to join an FX blocks pool that's more European located, and in a Toronto one you're going to be more of a North American based pool. But then the number of pools is continually expanding as more boxes come online. So there's no fixed number. I mean, obviously, I want to have the most decentralized storage available out of any offering or company out there today. So we could get those petabytes up there. Filecoin obviously has a sheer amount of storage, and storage companies out there have really high node requirements. You almost have to be, a company or a commercial entity to be able to run one of these nodes, whereas we really want it to be just people that can spin one up really easily with low computing needs and low electricity usage as well. So, yeah, I don't know if there's a fixed number, but I'm really excited. And the fact that we have one of ours completely sold out right now is, it's validating, but luckily we're able to just continually spin up more batches. But
I want to touch on the local aspect you brought up. So is there like an incentive for someone in like a remote part of India where there may not be a local pool of FX blocks? Would there be any added incentive for someone to create something new and afresh over there? Like, is there a mechanic within the system that sort of encourages a more widespread and a more interlinked network of blocks? Is this something that has been considered?
It's a good question. I think that might arise more so when there's that B2B and enterprise play more so. So as I said, we're consumer focused initially. And then if there was some sort of enterprise in India that wanted access to a whole bunch of decentralized nodes, but they wanted provenance of that data to remain within India, as an example, or anytime you care about the provenance of the data, we can at least say, your data resides within this country or this region. And that could be really important for health records or for legal purposes. But in terms of individual incentive, I think if you were, to be paid to have a node in a certain locale and to be able to provide a certain amount of storage and belong to a certain pool, there would be that incentive or mechanism there. But I think, with Helium, or where you're providing nodes for IoT networks or the internet, and you really, really need that expansion there might be that incentive to be the one providing that node. I will say, however, we've also been experimenting with Starlink. So if you can connect one of your FX blocks to Starlink, you can then propagate that internet, like a local area network internet, throughout a pool of boxes. So that could be a really interesting use case. If there wasn't access to rural broadband somewhere, most likely Canada over half the developing world, then you could potentially, or we look at like remote and indigenous communities could potentially benefit from spinning up one of these local pools.
That's very cool. I've read online that you're planning on launching a token. I've heard your co-founder at a meetup once mention that the FULA token is coming, but I've also noticed that it may not be live just yet. So what's the plan for this, and how does it fit into the Functionland ecosystem?
Okay, great question. So yes, we are absolutely launching a FULA token. And we'll be doing this through a TGE, so a token generation event, and that is quite imminent. I will not say the specific date on that, and perhaps we can update your viewers in a little bit of time. We are doing sort of AMAs with various launch pads. So some of those community members who are still wanting to buy or access the token prior to a public sale are learning about that and getting a little more alpha on exactly how the TGE will happen. And we want to make sure our community members are also really aware and privy to the terms and how it's going to work out and when it's going to happen. But it is very soon. I think possibly even shortly after the publication of our podcast, I could see it being that soon. Our plan is to work with one or two centralized exchanges to make sure it's available to those that feel more comfortable purchasing token through centralized exchanges, and then work with some decentralized exchanges. And then we have had already like a launchpad through IoTex, for example, and then we're working on one right now with the Cheeky crypto community. I think they're primarily UK based, for example. But yeah, the FULA token will be available publicly for the first time, yes, after TGE.
Great. So what role do you think it'll have in the Functionland ecosystem? Is this a governance token? Would this be a method of payment? Probably equity in a company isn't something that will ever be done in crypto thanks to regulations. So how do you see its role initially and then the functionality that you may add to it in the future?
Sure. I'll speak quite broadly about it. I'm obviously not a lawyer or a company's lawyer, and I want to make sure that I don't say things that jeopardize its existence and so forth. So the idea, and what's absolutely true, we can always come back to, is that you earn FULA tokens for operating storage and compute node. So already, people who've been participating in our testnet have the FX Blocks decentralized app on their phone, and they are running their FX Blocks, and they are earning FULA tokens already. So those people who are early adopters and our community members have already been earning FULA token through testnet. And then once we go to mainnet and post TGE, that will then equate out to FULA tokens that they have had the advantage of accruing already so far. So it's very much a utility token. And I think we're getting people talking about this season and that season, and it's Ethereum-based utility season coming up next as far as I'm concerned. So the token itself is to help ensure that people are rewarded for providing storage and compute, maintaining good node uptime and making sure that their nodes are running, doing what they're supposed to. And then also, like I mentioned, how it can pay other decentralized application or code developers and those downward dependencies. So the token itself is used for those purposes. And essentially, like the blockchain aspect, like that layer 3, I suppose, that we build on is a ledger to say, who has stored which files, where, and for how long, and so that they are rewarded proportionally to what they've been providing. So that's what the token and the blockchain really does. It's a ledger of basically it's proof of how much provisioning you've provided and what you're providing to the network.
Okay. So is there a different price for example, providing storage versus providing compute? Is there a chart or something that people can look at to sort of predict the sort of earnings they could expect for a certain amount of contribution?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, will be quite determined by the market, and as the market is maturing. We have in the past built ROI calculators that people could use they could say, what's the ROI on purchasing FX blocks and how soon would it be paid off? And that calculation itself is continually shifting and changing, because originally we had said you buy an FX blocks for X amount of dollars and you don't have to pay your cloud storage costs or your cloud subscription costs. And so we saw what is the offset of that. But now, then there's also the ability to earn the token for providing storage. So you're offsetting your cloud storage costs, earning for providing. But then also now, because we're deep in aggregator, you can earn, let's say, data tokens from the streamer network in addition to ours as an example. And that ecosystem itself is just growing. So it'll always be just one token. We're not going to have multiple tokens. And I'm sure the storage and compute would be sort of combined as some kind of value that the token would equate to. But how the ROI works and how you earn and at what rate, I think, is in flux depending on where we get with the roadmap.
Anything else you'd like to talk about with the token? Anything you'd like to build up on? Any anticipation ahead of the TGE that you'd like us to discuss in more details for potential earlier investors?
Well, as I mentioned, those who already have an FX blocks and it's plugged in and working and linked into our network have already been earning, so they already have that advantage. So if you were to obtain FX blocks prior to our TGE and participate in testnet, then there's an advantage, although that advantage is closing shortly because of our TGE event. But I'd say definitely, and we'll re-emphasize our socials at the end, but definitely follow us on Twitter and join our Telegram. So in our Telegram, we've got a main channel for everyone to chat, and then also support channel for those that are onboarding their FX blocks units. And then just, pay attention to the socials and also come out to Toronto-based events because we're there chatting and talking. And I think we'll be quite involved with Consensus coming up in Toronto here and the Futurist Conference in May as well. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Very cool. So I'd like to talk about your founder experience a little bit, because as someone who's running a business, my mom was super excited that I would be talking to you, because finding, a highly qualified female business leader in this space, it's like she's very excited to see more people involved in this manner. So, what about the cultural norms in the space have you had to, address as a female founder over here? And, there is definitely like a bit of a bro culture in crypto. So how have you managed to navigate that, while still, having your eye on the ball?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't really have any answers per se to it. I definitely am proud to be a woman in Web3. And I think I really felt that during the last bull market. I was at ETH Lisbon and I got to meet all sorts of women involved with different organizations. And there's the SheFi movement as well that I'm observing and seeing lots of women developers or other people based in Web3 get involved with. There should definitely be more women in Web3 and definitely more women founders. I think I was really lucky to find a team that just saw me as another teammate, and we just got on with it and started building. And I'm really, really glad to have the teammates that I have, because they've incorporated me in, every decision, all the technical aspects, and also taught me. I think, I mentioned we had that AI startup initially prior to Functionland. And, Kayvon taught me as much as he could about AI, but then I landed up going to Durham College and studying AI to make sure that I could keep up with everyone and keep my skills really sharp. So I think, I always do tell people that the greatest thing about Web3 and being a woman in Web3 is that I can go to an event downtown Toronto, show up at Casa Mezcal, show up at Kensington Market through some back alley to a SUI event, and have a whole community of friends, people that you've seen multiple times, that you've gone to conferences with, that you've traveled with, that are following your progress and you're following their progress. And, as a woman in a big city, maybe you're not as close with your university or high school friends anymore, or maybe you don't have a strong community. And so with Web3, there is this community that exists, and especially when you can meet with them in real life. So I always encourage women to contemplate joining the culture and the community.
Yeah, I found a lot of, value in going to these meetups. Like, it's really important to just understand how other people in the space that you're in see the space, because you're at your computer all day, all week.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is like how we touch grass.
Yeah. And some barbecues you go to, there's only a couple of people in the corner talking alpha and sharing tips, but at these events you can just nerd out and talk about it in great depth and have so much fun.
How has the founder life been in Canada? Have you felt that maybe the network doesn't meet some aspects that you believe you really need to take the company to the next level? Or have you found a tribe over here where you feel it works?
Oh, it's a great question. I think as someone that has worked a lot in the accelerators and startup incubators across Toronto and the surrounding region. So through the OCI, I was quite involved in all of them. And then I've been involved, so sort of as someone that's helping with the administration of them per se. And I've also been a founder within them. And the experience is very, very different. So we were luckily able to be a part of, at least one regional innovation center's programming on the hardware side. And then we've joined the Innovation Boost Zone, actually at Toronto Metropolitan University, at IBZ. So there's at least one or two more Web3 or crypto-based companies in that incubator. But the most help we've got, if I'm being really honest, is we went through, as I mentioned, Outlier Ventures. They're based in the UK and London, but have a very global presence. And they put us through a very rigorous program. But they helped us with the company formation, the formation of our association in Switzerland, all the legal aspects. They helped with the token economics, token engineering, the hardware, software development. And then they helped us with our investment rounds and how we put together a round that's not just equity-based venture capital, right? How do we actually do token-based raise, and helped introduce us to family offices, VCs, angel funds that we would never have even known existed had it not been for their help. So Jamie Burke and his team at Ally Ventures was absolutely essential to our growth, especially getting that strong start. And then we also went through Techstars in Seattle. And that was also instrumental, because that's when we're starting to grow even further. And that's at the point where we were closing our seed round, and we're able to also be put in touch with amazing investors that became part of that round. But I think more locally, the help and support has just been more peer-based and underground, let's say, per se, I think. And then also there's been lots of blockchain companies who've come and have their own meetups or organizations or representatives here in Toronto. But I don't know if there's been a recognition of that by the innovation community in our province or city. And I think there needs to be much more recognition of the fact that, we're like Ethereum hub here, and we've got so much history in blockchain and Web3 development, and there's such a huge future of it, especially with the fintech presence and the commercial banking here. There's lots more that could be worked on here.
You mentioned that, your advisors helped you with that hardware and software balance. And that is something that I think is really interesting, because people often just choose one. So how do you take on two deeply complex ways of building concurrently? How was that challenge, and how do you manage it as a team?
Yeah, it was very, very difficult. I have to say, I advice for anyone to take that on, because we've always tried to be quite a lean team, or at least once the bear market came and we knew we had to really extend our runway and that we had to deliver on our hardware, blockchain, and software promises, that we had to really like scale down that team from what it originally been earlier on, and to make sure that people who couldn't afford to be part of a team and not earn money were not being pulled on at that time, right? So sometimes it came down to a more core group that was able to find contracts to work elsewhere while focusing on building the company. We were able to do a pre-sale campaign for our hardware, so that really helped fund the development of the hardware and get the commercial production units ready. So we weren't having to use all of our investment money towards that. And now that we actually have the hardware, we're generating revenue. So we're not just focused on VC funds to keep us afloat or to help us grow. We're actually able to use the revenue from our own hardware. And I think that makes us special in the space. But yeah, there's been times when we've had to take the core founding team and fracture us amongst software, hardware, and so like the blockchain piece, and then also get people up to speed on blockchain, because not everyone had that as their initial first strength, right? And then have everybody come back together. So you almost need like a chief of staff, someone who can go in between all those teams and then make sure that everyone's still on the same page and building something that's congruent. So it hasn't always been easy, but luckily our founders are just so passionate too about what they're building that it was hard work, like 22-hour days, I'm sure, for some, but still came together.
Any, quick about turns, any on the fly moves that you made that you think, wow, this is going to like position us in a fantastic way going forward? Like any of those?
Yeah, two quick ones. I'd say number one, we originally built on Raspberry Pis, and we needed a significant amount of Raspberry Pi, I think there was C4s or something like that, to actually deliver on our hardware campaign. And we were not able to lock down as many Raspberry Pis as we needed. And that was a huge bummer, especially during COVID and during the supply chain disruptions. It just wasn't going to happen. So we had to then pivot and find another circuit on chip or like some kind of board that would actually suit our purposes and be as easy or better than the Raspberry Pi 4 to build on. So that was a bit of a scramble, and we had to change all our designs and make sure that the Rock chip 3588 that we decided on would work with everything. But it actually made us stronger and better, and the hardware we came out with as a result is far more versatile. So in hindsight, that was a great pivot. And the other thing is that I think we knew early on that we had, in fact, not just a CPU in our hardware, but a GPU and a neural processing unit. So we knew that providing access to the GPU processing abilities and these neural processing unit capabilities in terms of AI could actually come into demand. So this was 1 or 2 years back, but nobody was like knocking on our door or anything like that. But we kind of knew we were going to be building for this decentralized infrastructure needs. And now all of a sudden, everybody wants access to GPUs and CPUs and inference models and training and stuff like that. So like another pivot that we knew was coming. So sometimes people say, oh, now you're saying your AI and now you're saying your compute. And we've always been able to provide that through a decentralized mechanism. So it's always been part of like our roadmap. It's just making sure like the demand was there to pull it and make sure there was product market fit.
I love it when a plan like that just comes together.
Yeah.
What unexpected challenges do you say the Canadian startup ecosystem has thrown at you all? Anything that you think was a bit of a surprise?
Yeah, interesting. I think we've always known that the VC ecosystem, like there are VCs here and they do invest, but investing in deep tech or blockchain or crypto may not necessarily have been a part of their thesis off the bat. But I don't know. I think that they are still actively investing. Sometimes maybe the VC community in Toronto gets a harder time than it needs. But when the Liberals announced that capital gains change and shift. So I don't exactly know all of it, but basically they said that there was going to be like a penalty for capital gains. And this really startled a lot of founders and builders, and a lot of companies and founders threatened to leave Toronto. And I just thought that it wouldn't really happen. But then I did notice even in my own street, I've lost 2 families that have moved to Silicon Valley or Boston. And I'm not sure if they had better employment opportunities or if they were concerned about that. So I have noticed a brain drain. There was a company called Intellect, or I forget what it's called now, but that founder just left and went to Washington, and that really shocked me because he was a big player in the founder ecosystem here in Toronto. So that really shocked me. I think there's been a brain drain that actually is happening. So I'd love to see that be halted and reversed quickly.
Have you seen anything that would, suggest that it is being halted or reversed in any way?
They say I think some of the candidates that are running for the Liberal leadership have said that they would not enforce this capital gains plan that they had. And certainly the Conservatives would not enforce or put that plan in place. So there's maybe relief in that side. But I don't think we need to be far more competitive, Toronto, to attract and retain innovative companies and like really, like brave founders. I think we have to make sure that this environment is competitive compared to Silicon Valley or Boston or Singapore. So I need to see a stronger signal. But I'm never leaving. So yeah.
I'm sure the folks at Toronto DAO also share a lot of your similar outlooks on this. That is kind of their mission, to keep tech founders in Toronto so you can build from Toronto out. So yeah, there's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah.
So this is your second bull run as a founder, right? So how is this one different, and what did you learn from there that you feel gave you a bit of insight into how to be proactive in this bull run?
The fervor and frenzy and the excitement around that initial bull run, I think it was like DeFi summer of 2021 or a little bit beyond that, was really, really exciting. And to go to conferences, especially developer focused conferences, was just such a thrill. And this time around, I think the meme coin situation has taken a lot of liquidity out of the space, and I think it's really hurt a lot of people. And I follow lots of different people that give advice on investing and trading, like give out their alpha. And I was alarmed to see some of the people I respected a lot and whose shows or blogs or videos I loved really push these meme coins and try and make cases for why dog with hat or pop cat or something is going to be this long-term hold or something like that. And so I was really, now, everyone's upset that these meme coin projects may have been rug pulls or whatnot. And it doesn't need to be a rug pull or a scam to be dangerous for people to invest in and engage in. So I was really excited for this bull market. In fact, to see this utility coin and alt season market pick up and some of these really strong altcoin projects to do well again. But the very recent things that have happened in crypto are really unfortunate. And I hope that we can get back to building solid utility-based projects.
So who do you think needs to be the first mover to make this shift happen? Is it the users? Is it the founders? Is it regulators? Where does this change that you wish to see begin?
I think it has to be the builders building things that have true pull, true demand, and that achieve product market fit. So I think, it's totally up to the founders to build something that's actually useful and wanted. And, even the whole NFT season when NFTs were so great during COVID, everybody was buying them and collecting them. I thought people putting way too much credence on this art, and I've never been a huge proponent of everybody buying and purchasing, let's say, art-based NFTs. I could see NFTs as a vehicle and a mechanism and piece of technology being a part of the future going forward, but that huge frenzy and focus on art and encouraging people to buy them, I was wary of, I have to say. But I think what's going to happen is projects like ours that offer what AWS and the big tech clouds do now. So is it like content distribution, retrievability, low latency, maybe mobile gaming, things like that. So where projects actually provide the back end and the infrastructure for facilitating cheap, fast, easy, AI, gaming, and social-based decentralized applications will win. Yeah, so it's a DeFi. I really like the idea of regenerative finance and decentralized physical infrastructure networks, or DePi, decentralized physical AI. I think those types of projects are going to be what win in the end.
Nice. Have you seen anything in this market that you really like? You can name drop some projects, you can name drop a sector, whatever you like. Anything that you think this should be getting more attention. And I wish this is the kind of use case I wish people banded behind more.
All right. Well, I like to consider myself like an ETH maxi. I love everything that's sort of being built within Ethereum. And I know that there are really strong projects to use like the ERC20 token, or who are leveraging Ethereum's security or various aspects of the blockchain that haven't even been realized yet or haven't even come to the forefront of the market yet. So I know there's just a lot of potential that still is coming to fruition within that ecosystem. I like some of the projects coming out of Protocol Labs. It's sort of decentralizing itself. So one of them is Storacha, which is a direct competitor to Functionland in terms of like hot retrievable storage, but it's built on top of Filecoin, whereas ours is more built on IPFS and is, I'd say, more decentralized, at least for now. And also there's one called LilyPad, which is decentralized access or democratized access to GPU and compute. So if you have a research project and you want to run a big training model exercise, then you can use Docker or container and use their infrastructure to run it and then be able to get the results. I see people hinting at DeSci, decentralized science, but having come from academia and knowing how research projects work, I don't see how DeSci is going to be on our doorsteps anytime soon, or anyone would realize how a project could be wrapped up and completed and then reward all those investors who believed in the project, because academia and research just operate so differently to business in the real world. So I keep my eye on like DeSci and RWA, real world assets, but I like the idea. I'm going to focus right now on decentralized cloud computing and what's related, adjacent.
Great. I like those sectors. I think I would love to see more building going on there, because there's very much a purpose to improve what exists in all those things, right? Improve access, improve, reducing costs, make it more resilient, something. So yeah, I'm completely on board with you with the way you see this.
And sure, there's going to be rising demand for it, right? With these AI agents and LLMs. So meeting that demand is key as well, yeah.
Let's go to your founder experience again. Like, you've been managing a team for now several years. Is there something that you've learned over these last few years that you wish you could have applied earlier, or any pointers you've heard from other founders that you've integrated into your way of managing teams and growing teams and scaling operations?
Yeah, I mean, I won't get into it this time around, but I've definitely gone through sort of mental health and mental wellness issues, I suppose, during this founding journey. I'm now the healthiest I've ever been mentally. And I think that comes then with a lot of patience, maturity, a lot of growth. So with my team, I just wish I had during those really, really tough times and when we were really stressed out, I was hard on them sometimes. I didn't show people enough grace. And so in this founding journey, I think I've come a long way as a teammate, not necessarily even just as a leader, although I'd say as a leader as well. But I think, building in the trenches in Web3 or any kind of technology-based sector is not easy. And so I just think, learning to be patient, have that grace has been very key.
And is there something you think that this industry needs? Like, there are people with professional profiles in other industries that this industry, Web3, could really benefit from? Do we need more philosophers, social scientists, writers, marketers? Like, is there something missing in that, a star chart of the competencies needed for this industry to pop? Is there an axis that you think is a little underserved?
That's a really interesting question. I think, when I'm on stage, when I'm watching panelists and people on stage, those that do have a strong philosophical background or background in history. So like Juan Bennett, for instance, he's the founder of Protocol Labs, and he is so intelligent and has so much depth when it comes to history and philosophy and why one should build things and why public goods are important and why we should be building those public goods is very refreshing to hear. So I think, some more of that. With community building and community organizing, that takes a certain skill set for sure. on the AI side, it's really interesting. I think math, so having to know like linear algebra and calculus and statistics, I think we should not be learning those. And then there's a lot of push for people saying, well, now there's Cursor or Grok 3 or these different types of LLMs that will make the need for software engineering or coding obsolete. That's a bit of a misnomer. I would still advocate that people do learn computer science and learn how to code. Yeah, I think probably just really need a lot of, what's it called? Like the ability to really critically assess something. So to really know if something is feasible or true, or if there's some sort of scammy underlining things happening in a project, for instance. So critical thinking and analysis skills are probably sometimes missing and much needed as well. Yeah.
And is there a way you think people who would like to improve on these skills can acquire them? Do you have any suggestions for these folks to make them more rounded participants in Web3?
It's a good question. I ended up going back to college, like I said, quite a long time after my PhD, and I'm pleasantly surprised at how much I really pull on what I learned in those courses. People seem to say, post-secondary education's not necessary, or, Elon Musk's like, that's ridiculous. Everyone can be self-taught. But sometimes taking a course with a bunch of your peers and working on a group project together and solidifying those skills can be really useful. But yeah, I think even playing around with these ChatGPT equivalents or Grok and asking questions is actually a really intriguing, really interesting way to learn new subjects. It's sort of like it groups a whole bunch of articles and a whole bunch of things together, and then you can ask more probing questions of it. So, people talk about courses being available through open source or made available from MIT or Stanford or something like that. So I think it's all there. We just have to take the time to do deep concentration and deep thinking and take the time to learn something new. Yeah.
Yeah, in the world of AI, it just seems that everything's at your fingertips, and that desire to get into deep into something, learn exactly how it works. I hope we don't lose that desire.
Yes.
Because I read somewhere that, now people are just offloading a lot of that critical thought to Claude.
Yeah.
And I use these things as well. But yeah, I found that as a writer, having LLMs that write has actually made me think more about my writing.
Really? Hey, yeah, I think I tend to agree with you about that. Yeah.
Because I don't want to use words that I used in the past that LLMs tend to overuse. I'm like, it gives me like a slight ick somewhat.
Yeah.
So it's making me second guess how I present ideas. So what you said about, people don't need to be software engineers. Some people believe you don't need to be a software engineer because like a cursor can do so much. I think it's more important to be a better software engineer so you can check the work of the AI, enhance it to get it up to a professional proficiency, and make sure it works.
Yes, no, for sure. Or even like cybersecurity. And I think that's something that Toronto and Ontario should be pushing as a skill set that people can learn and go find employment in, for example. So like you don't want to just coast along when it comes to cybersecurity. You want to be able to go back and analyze like a critical situation and how it happened with a person in the loop, maybe.
For sure. So, it's been amazing having you, Kate. Like we've been chatting for a little bit, and yeah, is there anything that you'd like to tell the audience? Any tidbits of wisdom? Any bit of encouragement? Anything that you'd like to share that you think leave a mark on my audience?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'll first just say, do please look up Functionland. We are a great and growing community. We're filled with all sorts of fun and interesting people, both locally here in Toronto and around the world. So you can find us at the handle @Functionland. So on Twitter and on Telegram, Discourse as well. And do come to these live events in Toronto. Come help build the community. You'll find us there as well. And to those that have been building in the Web3 space and who've kept their heads down and are building something of utility and that is going to be of use to society, I just say, keep building, and the true projects will prevail.
Anything that the fans can look forward to ahead of the token generation event? Any specific thing that they should be ready for? Any exchanges that they should be looking to sign up for ahead of this launch?
No, that's a great question. I will say, Follow our socials to get the latest information. If you have an FX Blocks already and you haven't been able to get it online yet, please do reach out. I know Matthew from Toronto DAO just got his up and running recently, and we're glad to see that. We do have a device up and running in the Bitcoin Bay offices downtown on Bay Street. So if you want to come see one or get some advice on how to get yours up and running, please come and visit us over there. And yeah, just reach out to us, DM us. We are available to help and support.
Thank you so much for visiting over here, Dr. Kate Withers. This is Marv and Dr. Kate Withers signing off from Toronto, Canada. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Do leave a rating on Apple and Spotify to help this podcast reach more people, and share this with anyone who's passionate about what the new internet could be. If you'd like to support the podcast, each episode can be minted on Pods Media right into your wallet. Link in the description as always. Take care and see you on the next one.